Hi everyone, and welcome back to our EJP sessions. Today we're going to talk about consumption and consumerism. Firstly, it's important to clearly understand the concepts we're working with. So let's see what first comes to mind when you hear the words consumption and consumerism. Pause the video and write it down on a piece of paper. So first, we're going to start with consumption. Consumption is the action of using up a resource. It is also the process of using something, often so that there is less of it available afterwards. The term may refer to the use of goods and services in an economy, or how much of those goods and services people use. When we say that something is fit for human consumption, it means that people can use it. You might have heard this word before in the news headlines, or maybe you even heard your parents talking about it. But have you ever thought about why people pay so much attention to consumption? The answer is quite simple. Consumption is the basic foundation of economics, as well as a country's broader economy, which is essentially how countries earn and use money. We base our whole economic system of reward and progress on purchasing and producing more and more goods and services. In an economy, consumers decide what to consume based on availability and prices. We also base what we consume on our own needs and wants. If, for example, a person desires a sandwich, they will take the effort to make the sandwich. Once it is made, the food is consumed, resulting in the end of an economic activity. Next up is consumerism. Consumerism is the idea that increasing the consumption of goods and services is always a desirable goal, and that a person's well-being and happiness depend on consuming more and more. Some people believe that consumer spending stimulates production and economic growth, but consumerism has been widely criticized for its economic, social, environmental, and psychological consequences. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of consumerism? Advocates of consumerism point to how consumer spending can drive an economy and lead to increased production of goods and services. As a result of higher consumer spending, a rise in GDP can occur. GDP is the total value of the goods and services produced in a country during a specific time period, usually a year. Business owners, workers in industry, and owners of raw resources can profit from sales and say that rising consumption has helped meet their basic needs and create jobs. So what might be the disadvantages of consumerism? These can be put into 4 categories. Consumerism is often criticized on cultural grounds. Some see that consumerism can lead to a materialistic society that neglects other values. Traditional modes of production and ways of life can be replaced by a focus on consuming ever more costly goods in larger quantities. Consumerism can also create incentives for people to take on unsustainable debt levels that can contribute to financial crises and recessions. For example, someone wants the newest iPhone model to show their friends they can afford to buy nice things like them, and to maybe feel included in the group. This person does not need a new phone. The one that they currently have works perfectly well, but could be considered outdated. They do not have the money to buy it, so they go to the bank to take a loan in order to afford it, and this creates a debt. Consumerism is blamed for increasing status anxiety, where people experience stress associated with a social status and a perceived need to keep up with the trends. People are incurring debt and working longer hours to pay for the high consumption lifestyle, consequently spending less time with their family, their friends, and community organizations. Lastly, the consumer goods industry and the direct effects of consumption have damaging implications for our environment. These can include pollution, resource depletion, and problems with waste disposal from excess consumer goods and packaging. Gary Gardner, the director of research for WorldWatch, warns that the effects of consumerism on the environment are so bad that, as just one example, 37% of species could become extinct due to climate change, which is very directly related to consumption. Now we will focus on the effects of globalization, consumerism, and consumption on our environment. On your piece of paper, write what you think is the answer to each question, and I will explain the answers as we go along, so you don't have to wait long to find out if you were right. The first question is about global inequality. What % of the world's resources are consumed by the top 10 wealthiest countries? In 2005, 59% of the world resources were consumed by the wealthiest 10% of the population. On the other hand, the poorest 10% accounted for just 0.5% of resource utilization. Now, if we look at some areas of spending, we can see that our society has serious problems. It is estimated that every year, Europeans spend $8 billion on ice cream. This is nearly enough to make sure every child on the planet can go to school, twice. The richer countries consume and use more and more each year, to the detriment of developing countries, who suffer from extreme hunger, untreated disease, and limited medicine. In terms of environmental justice, there is some extreme global injustice going on, and very little is being done to mitigate the needs. This question is about obesity and hunger. Since 1975, the level of obesity has reduced, increased, or stayed the same. Research shows a close link between the rise of the modern culture of consumerism and the worrying rates of obesity we are seeing around the world. However, this should come as no surprise, since consumerism implies exactly that, using as much as we can rather than as much as we need. This causes a domino effect of problems on society. Over-consuming leads to obesity, which in turn leads to further cultural and social problems. For example, diets of highly processed food and the sedentary lifestyle that goes with heavy reliance on automobiles have led to a worldwide epidemic of obesity. In the United States, an estimated 65% of adults are overweight or obese, and the country has the highest rate of obesity amongst teenagers in the world. In comparison, 20% of Africa's population is malnourished as a result of extreme poverty, climate challenges and environmental difficulties such as deforestation and drought, and violent conflicts. Up next, we have resource depletion. So how many tons of plastic enter the ocean every year? The correct answer is that up to 12 million tons of plastic enters the ocean every year, forming giant floating garbage patches all over the world. As well as obvious social and economic problems, consumerism is destroying our environment. As the demand for goods increases, the need to produce these goods also increases. This leads to more pollutant emissions, increased land use and deforestation, and accelerated climate change. We are experiencing devastating effects on the planet's water supplies. Waste disposal is becoming a problem worldwide, and our oceans are slowly but surely becoming a giant waste disposal pit. It is estimated that over half of the plastic produced every year is single use. This means that it's only used once, and then either thrown into landfills or finds its way into the environment. Going back to global injustice, the poorer areas are the ones that have to suffer the most from this. Our next question is about fast fashion. So compared to when our grandparents were our age, how many clothes do we own? Okay, so fast fashion is the mass production of cheap disposable clothing. Countless new collections per year make us feel constantly out of date and encourage us to keep buying more. So now we have 5 times more clothes than our grandparents had. It felt great until we found out what was hiding behind this trend. In reality, this continuous accumulation of cheap garments is only possible because of constant reduction of production costs. This, in turn, has serious consequences on our health, our planet, and on our garment workers' lives. In China, polluted water causes 75% of diseases and over 100,000 deaths annually. Meanwhile, cancer rates amongst villagers who live along polluted waterways are much higher than the Chinese national average. In all, an estimated 320 million Chinese people do not have access to clean drinking water, more than the entire population of the United States. But it's not all bad. There are things that you can do to help, and we've put together some solutions that you can adopt as well. So a hot topic right now is sustainable consumption. But what is it? Sustainable consumption is the use of material products, energy, and immaterial services in such a way that their use minimizes impacts on the environment, so that human needs can be met not only in the present, but also for future generations. This applies to individuals and households, but also to governments, businesses, and other institutions. It relies on these things: effective use of resources so that we minimize waste and pollution, using renewable resources, and using products with fuller life cycles that last longer. This will help intergenerational and intragenerational equity, which means equal living for people living today and people living in the future. How can you become a sustainable consumer? There's several things you can do, and here are some examples. Things like researching about the companies you would like to buy products from, Finding sustainable alternatives. Sustainability begins at home. Look around your house and make sustainable swaps for products you use. Recycle your plastic containers and store your food in glass containers. Invest in a recyclable water bottle or try a refillable spray mop. Opt for reusable cleaning cloths instead of paper towels. Bring your own bags when you go shopping and buy already used clothing and household items. One of the biggest shifts you can make in consuming habits is towards buying second-hand clothing and household items. Thrift stores, flea markets, and your local charity shop have a wide variety of clothes, dishes, pans, frames, kitchen items, candles, and even furniture. There's no need to overhaul your consumer choices in one day, but as you start making one change, you'll most likely find yourself making more and more. Most importantly, by making more conscious purchases, you're saving money and preserving the environment. Teach others how to become informed consumers, and this is much easier than you think. Just talk about sustainability in your day-to-day conversations. Guide people where to buy ethically and where to avoid, and you can be active on things like social media or within your community organizations. Question people's choices, but make sure you're not rude. Don't be afraid to reach out to members of local communities and MPs to suggest and initiate change. There's no harm that can come from raising awareness in your local community, whether it is to your friends, family, neighbours, teachers, head teacher, or your local MP. Be clear, kind, and factual, and follow up your letter with a phone call or create a petition. These are just some pointers to ask yourself when buying certain products. That is all for today, and thank you for your attention.